We have heard time and time again the promise of a new MMORPG revolution. Maybe, just maybe, it's now upon us. Hello, my name is GamerZach and welcome to my 15 upcoming PC MMORPGs in 2020 and 2021 list. Now, MMOs take forever to release, so this year I'm doing something different. Every game I listed last year that's still in development, I'm putting in the bonus section. That way you're getting a lot more new stuff in this video, but also that means there are actually almost 50 games mentioned right here. If you want to know more about the bonus section games, be sure to watch last year's video too, linked below. If you appreciate what you see here, please do like, subscribe, and share the video with others looking for a new online world to live in, as it really does keep this channel stay live and these videos being made. Alright, now let's get started. First one out the gate is Astaria, by appropriately named PlayAstaria. Calling itself a hardcore fantasy MMORPG, this is aiming to be not so typical to the genre with what they figure would be uncomfortable decisions and choices when it comes to gameplay design. A focus on communities, crafting, and player versus developer (PvD) gameplay, which is interesting. The hardcore stuff comes in the form of weighty combat, item loss, power caps, along with logistical limitations, and combat is a hybrid tab plus action system. They're also very clear that early access is very much not release, and that it's an indie development. So that means we can expect bugs, hiccups, and more speed bumps along the way, but it doesn't mean that it'll be all bad. Just manage your expectations. It was meant to release by the end of 2019, but it was pushed back to early 2020, and the plan is to spend 1 year in early access development for a 2021 release. But you know how delays are in this MMORPG genre. Frequent, common, often are the delays. It could all work out, and maybe Astaria's experimentation will be what makes this game for you. And then for one that we discovered a few years ago, it's the Saga of Lucimia by Stormhaven Studios. Calling itself a high fantasy group-based MMORPG, this is challenge-focused epic adventure in a sandbox world with no quest hubs, no minimap, a classless system, and skill-based combat. By the sounds of things, this is trying to be as freeform and open as possible, and the focus on groups makes this a bit more like tabletop D&D, just in MMO form. There's housing, crafting, and it's entirely PvE with no PvP, which I know many prefer, but the lack of competitiveness might turn some people away. It's been in development since 2014, so it's been a while, and earliest estimates are full release by 2021. Monetization is planned to be subscription-based, but the exact details aren't confirmed yet. It looks decent so far, though the tabletop approach probably won't appeal to everyone, so keep that in mind as we watch the Saga of Lucimia move forward with development. Next up, we've got Defend the Night by Ninja Loot Games. Calling itself a modern dark fantasy MMORPG, this is promising a unique leveling and progression system, and there's an attempt to move away from grindiness by having event-driven gameplay. Players will build and defend their own city and explore the landscape, delving into dungeons to challenge the darkness. 11 classes, 4 races, and tab target combat, something that some consider an outdated combat system, but there are many who still prefer it. PvE and PvP are available, with a big note on competitive gameplay and leaderboards. This was going through testing phases in 2019, however, they aren't willing to commit to a clear release window at the moment. I can see this becoming more playable over the next 2 years, but whether it actually completes and releases, well, we'll just have to wait and see if Defend the Night can make it through. And then we have Hordes by Hordes.io. Free-to-play, browser-based, and in open beta. I know just from that, this looks a little indie for many of you, but it's really popular and people seem to be having a lot of fun playing. Find your clan, participate in large-scale PvP wars, hunt down bosses, and rise to the top in group-based multiplayer. It's browser-based, so it's pretty flexible in terms of how you can play it, and there are some interesting features like a world builder. Overall, it seems like a nice approach to the genre for a niche, though the player base is pretty large compared to many other indie MMOs out there. So you won't be alone if you give it a try. It's free, so if you feel like it's worth a look, you can hop in and you'll be able to decide quickly for yourself whether Hordes is for you. And then for one that many were requesting last year, it's Oath by Ready Up Studios. This is a game with the traditional and expected MMORPG features with multiple classes and action-based combat. Explore a PvE-focused world as a berserker, pyromancer, rogue, knight, cryomancer, and more. PvP is also a thing with versus arenas, capture the flag, and other upcoming game modes which you can partake in solo or with a group of friends. There are also social systems related to guilds and land ownership. Meanwhile, in-game transactions are said to be limited to cosmetic only, so that's up to you to decide if you like it or not. It all sounds good and was kickstarted successfully. Unfortunately, updates are few and far between, and there already has been development drama, so it didn't exactly get off to a running start. Alpha is meant to start by the end of 2019, but at the time of making this video, nothing has been confirmed. So we can only hope that Oath sorts out all its troubles, but we can watch it through 2020 and see if it keeps its promises. For something a little bit more tactical, we have Waven by Ankama. From the creators of Dofus and Wakfu, this is currently in alpha and looks like a tactics game at first, but it's got a persistent world, player housing, and other MMO familiar features, along with an art style that does stand out for the genre. Tactical combat like this isn't so common in MMORPGs, so it's a nice option to have for those of you that prefer it, but it could be for more of a niche audience. Though the developers do have multiple games like this released in the past, and that could mean their experience will allow them to refine this format to be the best it can be. It's focused on PvP competitive combat at the moment, though there are mentions of PvE and an open world going forward, so we might see more of that over the next year or so. Going through alpha in 2019, you can have a closer look at Waven right now if you're intrigued, and maybe you'll fit right in, though it's only in French at the moment. And now for something that a lot of people might be interested in, it's Temtem by Crema. Explore various islands, catch Temtem, battle other tamers, defeat dojo leaders. This is sounding familiar. What looks to be like a Pokemon adventure, but as a creature collector MMO. But it's also not actually Pokemon. This raised over $500,000 on Kickstarter, so there is quite a bit of backing and a large community behind it already. But you might be thinking that it doesn't sound like a lot of money for an MMORPG. You'd be right, $500,000 will only get you so far, but it seems like the developers are aware of this and are trying to curb their goals and scope of the game to make sure things don't get out of hand. Meanwhile, early access release is planned for 2020. Temtem might be a smaller kind of MMO, but if they put that money to good use, it could still be a great experience and world to explore, if they manage to stop any kind of feature creep and capture what they're trying to. And then for something a little bit more crazy, I'm gonna cautiously mention Zenith by Ramen VR. Avatar customization with built-in voice modulation, familiar MMORPG mechanics with a new approach, and supposedly a way to move and look around in VR without getting dizzy. I have to be super cautious and skeptical of this. It's being made for VR first, though it is meant to be compatible with just PC and on your screen too. And it's an anime-inspired cyberpunk world. Sounds great, but also sounds like an incredibly massive undertaking in an age where VR is not a go-to or mainstream device. It was, however, fully funded on Kickstarter and raised a total of $280,000, but that still doesn't sound like a lot of money for a game like this, though there is some backing from investors too. Not to mention that the original goal was for a measly $25,000, which isn't much money. They also say things like supporting millions of players eventually, which is a phrase that puts me on edge honestly, because how often does that happen? Let alone with something this experimental. I'd keep an eye on Zenith if you're curious, but tread lightly. Next up we have Reign of Guilds by Atlant Games. This is a first-person MMORPG set in a dark medieval world. Guild warfare, diplomacy, conquering castles, and trade is a focus for this game, having different groups of players interact in meaningful ways. open world, PvP and PvE with a first-person, non-targeting action combat system with friendly fire enabled. This is trying to be a bit more old-school hardcore with some experience and item loss on death, depending on karma. Pre-alpha footage looks understandably a little rough, but honestly not all that bad. So there's a lot of potential here, though potential only goes so far. Developing towards a 2020 early access phase, and with the target of fully releasing by 2021, that's a pretty quick dev time for an MMO. But we can hope that Reign of Guilds breaks the trend of commonplace delays in the genre and actually sticks to its schedule. Going to the east, we've got Blue Protocol by Bandai Namco Studios. This is one that I have to start by saying that at the moment there are no plans for it to have a Western release. Not uncommon for MMO fans to face that hurdle, and I know there are ways around things, so take this game how you will. That might change in the future, but in the meantime, it's a pretty nice looking anime-styled game with a full action combat system, movement that allows you to get around a bit more freely, and plenty of world to explore filled with monsters to fight. There isn't a whole lot of information, plus translating isn't exactly my forte, but if Blue Protocol is something that's capturing your attention, and you don't mind it not being localized into English or other languages, then you can keep up with it over the next year to see how it does. Next is Fractured by Dynamight Studios, an open-world sandbox game supporting thousands of players where action combat and interactable environments are the unique thing for competitive and cooperative gamers. It's skill-based, so success is more to do with your prowess rather than stats or gear, and progression is horizontal, which might be what you're looking for. Meanwhile, you'll be gathering resources, crafting, trading, and adventuring by yourself, or you can set up a settlement with your guild. Dynamic gameplay and meaningful choices are promised, with your selected race having significant impact on the game, including being a choice between full open loot PvP to co-op only PvE. Monetization is buy to play, but there is a kind of VIP membership, which gives discounts and cosmetics, and it should be able to avoid all kinds of pay to win since your character will be competitive from the moment you create it. Sounds great, seems like it's got good ideas, though alpha gameplay does look a little rough, which makes sense, but it would be nice to see more of the pieces come together for Fractured over the next year or so. A little vague in the genre, it's Torchlight Frontiers by Echtra Games. Fast-paced, intense hack-and-slash combat and horizontal progression. I know many might not classify this as technically an MMO, but it's also hugely popular with MMO fans, and it always comes up in my MMORPG research, so it might be MMO enough to be listed here. You let me know what you think. Spawning from the Torchlight MMO idea, there's a persistent world, player housing in the form of forts, crafting, and larger social areas with smaller PvE zones and dungeons. Action RPG fans will enjoy this, and the MMO features might be enough to set it apart from the competition over in the RPG list, being Path of Exile 2 and Diablo 4. But it's always nice to have new flavors to choose from. Initially having a 2019 release date, it was delayed, and we should now have a 2020 release window for Torchlight Frontiers. With much hype, we just had the announcement of Crimson Desert by Pearl Abyss, building on the massive success of Black Desert that began as a prequel but has developed into very much its own thing. A single-player campaign is a part of this, so there's something for those looking for a more solo experience, but the MMORPG isn't forgotten, with various content at high levels, including PvE and PvP, using action-based combat. Character creation is also meant to be as deep as its predecessor, though how that plays into the new setting and story exactly remains to be seen. Looks great and expectations are high, but there are still a lot of details yet to be revealed and clarified. There's no clear release window, but beta tests are planned for 2020, at which point we'll be able to see if Crimson Desert will be as flourishing as its predecessor. For what's supposed to be a big one, it's New World by Amazon Games Studios. The only game that I properly listed last year being listed again here because they've actually committed to a 2020 release. May is when we should be able to get into this ambitious MMORPG from a studio that seemingly has all the backing in the world. It's an open-world MMO set on a fictional and supernatural island in the 17th century. Characters are classless with a focus on skill development, and there should be support for over 1,000 players per server. 50 on 50 PvP battles centered around forts are a thing, but PvE for the solo players isn't forgotten either, both with action combat. Non-combat activities are here too, like player housing, and the usual stuff you'd expect. Media on the game makes it look really impressive, though I'd be cautious of any downgrades and whether it really plays as excitingly as it makes itself out to be. And being such a heavily published game, Amazon is looking to make its money back with pre-orders and deluxe editions, which you may or may not be okay with. It could be amazing, but having watched MMORPGs come and go over the years, I'd probably still wait for New World to release and see what's actually discovered. And for the final main entry, but there's more after this, so keep watching, it's Life Beyond by Darewise Entertainment. Announced initially under the codename Project C, we now have a name for this sci-fi open-world MMORPG set during the dawn of a new age of humankind. Said to be a combination of EVE Online and a third-person action game, this one is using Improbable's Spatial OS to supposedly simulate a world that isn't usually possible. The trailer shows off building, vehicles, guns, alien creatures, and zip lines, but really not much has been confirmed or shown off in terms of what the game is actually going to be like at the end of the day. In alpha now and already selling expensive pre-order packs, you might want to hang on until the cheaper options become available, and there's still a lot of development to do in terms of player identity, world development, social features, resource cultivation, and combat, according to the roadmap. Life Beyond is another upcoming MMORPG that has a lot of backing, so it could lead to something that lasts, but I'm just gonna keep an eye on it for the next year and see whether it's a life worth living. Now before we move on to the myriad of bonus games, I just want to mention 3 right here because they're going to become playable in the next year or so, but not release. So we have Past Fate, which is set in a medieval fantasy world where freedom is key, entering early access in 2020, planned to be in development for 2 years, so most likely a 2022 release. Ember Sword, it's a free-to-play sandbox MMORPG that's said to be a mix of RuneScape and Albion. This is looking at an early 2022 release, but with alpha and beta phases starting in 2020. And I want to do a little mention of Book of Travels, a fairy tale world that's calling itself a tiny multiplayer online RPG, so a TMO RPG, and it might be interesting but not exactly massive. Alright, now for 30 more bonus games, but if you made it this far, you probably enjoyed your time here, and it would be greatly appreciated if you could like, subscribe, share this video, and ring that bell, as it really does help keep this channel running. Also, you can support more directly by using the Humble Bundle referral link, perusing my gaming merch store where I design my own products, or checking out the Patreon, all linked down below, with the Discord community, Twitch live streams, and social media accounts, where I create even more content like drawings, photos, and written articles. And now for all the games I listed last year that still don't have a clear release date, so I'll mention them here, but if you want to see them properly listed, be sure to check out the previous MMORPG video. There's Gloria Victis. It's like a medieval mountain blade plus planetside. It's in version 0.9 now, but reaching 1.0 release might still take over a year. Project Gorgon. It looks rough at first glance, but it has a consistent small player base and very positive reviews. There's a free demo on Steam too. Ashes of Creation. It released a battle royale game first called Apocalypse to figure out the combat system, and the MMO is still chugging along towards Alpha 1, but the cost of entry is higher than usual, with $75 being the cheapest price. Mad World, a HTML5 cross-platform 2D MMO that looks pretty cool, but it's still working its way towards a playable build. Legends of Aria. This was looking promising, but entered early access in 2019 with the intent to release in 2020, but unclear direction has made its development confusing and flip-flops keep happening, so I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't release in 2020. Ascent Infinite Realm. We've been watching this one for years and it's unclear if it'll ever finish as updates are slow and news is rare. Population Zero. Open beta is scheduled for 2020, so release is probably going to be 2021 onwards, maybe. And then we have 3 games that we've been watching for years and release always seems as far away as when we first looked at them. It is City of Titans, Ship of Heroes, and Valiance Online, all superhero MMORPGs, and maybe we'll look at these again next year and see if things are a little further along. Then we have ReWorld Online. It has its first module running, but unclear how long until the game is considered complete. Camelot Unchained. We've watched this game for years and it's in beta 1 right now, so maybe it'll be closer to completion in another year. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, still working towards beta, so unlikely to see it complete in 2020. Chronicles of Illyria, supposed to have some kind of release in 2019, but actual completion is probably going to be some time off. And then there's Crowfall, which is still in pre-alpha according to their website, so it's nowhere near complete at the time of making this video. And then I want to let you know about some Western releases. Phantasy Star Online 2, a 2012 MMO, is getting a Western release, so that's good news. Moonlight Blade, a lot of you ask about this. It was supposed to get a Western release, but Nexon has been having issues, and it's unclear if it's still happening. And then there is Lost Ark, an ever-popular Asian MMO, which has new rumors that are supporting the idea that it's getting a Western release, but it's not exactly confirmed yet. For expansions and continuations, WoW Classic is going strong, and there's a Shadowlands expansion for World of Warcraft as well. Old school RuneScape, if you didn't know, I want to let you know that it's still going with tens of thousands of players still playing. Elder Scrolls Online is getting an expansion which is going to Skyrim, and Archage Unchained kind of released as a revival for Archage, so you might be interested in that. And finally, to wrap up, let's go over some MMORPGs that are on the horizon. There's Pathfinder Online, which is still plodding along, slowly adding features with a roadmap going into 2020. Arkfall. This is still getting updates, but it's been in pre-alpha for 2 years, so it's playable in early access, but probably isn't finishing anytime soon. Rulers of the Sea. This is an alternate historical MMORPG set in the 18th century, but is just getting through community campaigns and crowdfunding now. Could be a long road to completion. Magic Legends. It's a Magic the Gathering MMORPG that was promised. We got a cinematic trailer, but that's about it right now. No idea when it's going to be releasing. Project TL. This used to be called Lineage Eternal. There's very little news and might eventually release or might not. It could just be cancelled, like Peria Chronicles was recently, unfortunately. Lord of the Rings MMORPG. This was announced and it's being developed by Amazon, and it might coincide with the TV series that is scheduled to start in 2021, but the MMO might be somewhat after. CCP Games, the creators of EVE Online, are hiring for a new and highly ambitious MMO, but they've been hiring for the past 2 years, so I'm not sure if they're actually going to announce their new game or not. And finally, Playable Worlds is a new studio from the lead designer of Ultima, and they've raised a couple million to make a new unannounced MMORPG. And that's it! 15 to 50 upcoming MMORPGs that might be releasing through 2020 and some into 2021, depending on their developments. Which ones are you most excited about? Also, here's something I'd like to know. Historically, we have one successful and popular MMORPG release every year. You can check the pinned comment for my list on that. So of the over 40 upcoming games mentioned here, which 2 do you think will make it? It's likely only 2 will survive. Which 2 is almost impossible to predict though. Now, if you'd like to see more upcoming games, check out the other lists on the channel sorted by genre shown at the top of the video for many more upcoming PC games, or my Gamer Encounter series where I take a much more extensive gameplay look at specific new games. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll see you in the next video.